conscription. Whatever name we give it, they all mean the same thing. The compulsory enrollment of persons for military service. In 2005, a CNN poll found that 85% of Americans would oppose mandatory military service. The affirmative is proposing that all men and women over the age of 18 should have to serve a minimum of 1 year in the armed forces. There are many reasons why instating mandatory military service would be wrong for the nation. First, the poll illustrates that the general public opinion is against it. Mandatory military service is costly, it would lower the quality of the military, and it would spark public protests. Today, my partner, Julie, and I will argue why the U.S. should not require mandatory military service. Those who are in favor of mandatory military service argue that it is a simple responsibility of citizenship the young people should have to undergo in exchange for the fortune of being an American. Under the Constitution, everyone born in the United States is born free. Forcing American citizens to complete 1 year of mandatory military service is not giving Americans their freedom. It is a form of slavery. We have gone so long without it. Why should we fix something that is not broken? Even if this was passed, there simply aren't sufficient jobs or money to employ all 4.3 million American 18-year-olds. Assuming some will find ways to get past this system, that's still a lot of men and women. Another important question to ask the affirmative is who would be exempt. Also, wouldn't people who are not physically fit be exempt? There are only so many positions in the Army that do not require any physical fitness. Is it fair that people who do not meet the military standards do not have to risk their lives? There are too many loopholes that people could use to get out of doing their duty. If this policy was instated, morale would decrease because people would be forced to serve. When the draft was last used, everything was very low-tech. Now the inside of a tank looks like the bridge of the Starship Enterprise and takes extensive training to operate. The cost of training new personnel would skyrocket if they only had to serve 1 year. Barry McCaffrey, a retired 4-star Army general, said, "National service is an absolutely bad idea because it would lead to lesser quality soldiers. Soldiers who actually want to be there won't work well with those who don't. The soldiers that are out there now are fighting because they want to protect their country, not because their government is forcing them to fight." As you all know, our nation is in a recession, which means a period of economic decline. If President Obama passed a law making it mandatory for American citizens to serve in the military, all those soldiers would need to get paid. Where would we get the money? The sudden influx of soldiers would need to be compensated, and the U.S. just can't afford it right now. In addition to it being costly, mandatory military service is also unnecessary. The U.S. is not at war and not in dire need of personnel. In fact, the military has more than enough troops. Mandatory military service is not needed and would spark public outrage at being forced to serve. Opponents, among them were Ronald Reagan and economist Milton Friedman, and they maintain that such mandatory military service has no place in a democracy. We live in a free nation, and the people should have the right to say no to mandatory military service. In Israel, they have always had mandatory military service. What used to be a sense of pride and civic duty is now becoming a resented task. More and more Israelis are avoiding serving. According to statistics, 3 out of every 10 men avoided their mandatory military service. The fact that it is not working in Israel proves that it would not work in the U.S. Serving in the Army is your entry card into society. If you do not serve, it is considered shameful in their culture. Who's to say that won't happen in the U.S. if we adopt their policy? Israel has been at war for many years, so a draft is reasonable in their case. A draft in America today is not reasonable or logical. Back when the draft was instated for the Vietnam War, there was public outrage and violent protests. We are in a day and age in which enough men and women are signing up for the Army, and more personnel are not needed. As of March 5th, 2009, 71,000 men and women are enrolled in the armed forces. Instating mandatory military service at this time is unnecessary. In conclusion, forcing Americans to complete mandatory military service is basically a form of slavery and tramples on our freedom. It would cost way too much money, and it infringes on our personal liberties. Anti-war protests and riots would break out, and it would just create more problems for the U.S. Mandatory military service should not even be considered as an option in today's America. Thank you.